All right, welcome everybody to a special edition of High and Wide Radio. I'm your co-host Jack. Jim has the night off, and and Chris. Let me bring you in here. Are you affiliated with anybody? Or are you just a diehard Flyers?
I'm just me.
Just me.
Born and raised. Yep.
A little background, just so our viewers understand a little bit here. I was at the Flyers game, Capitals, definitely under the influence of alcohol. One tweet led to another, and here we are having the Torts debate, which has been a thing, definitely on Twitter. I've seen it on Facebook, a couple of Flyers Facebook pages. People seem to be having their say with that and whatnot. Needless to say, Chris and I got into it a little bit. Chris's nickname, the effing moron. I'm just kidding. I had to get that out of the way. Again, we showed up to the game. It was just my dad and I. And we couldn't even get in the door. So we were at Xfinity for a while before we finally made it over to the game. And then the Michkov magic just got me going a little bit more. But ultimately, the reason why we're here today, instead of going at it with 36 character tweets back and forth on Twitter, or X, which I'm not going to lie to you, I hate. I don't tweet that often, and I do it for a reason. But sometimes I can't help myself, and this is what happened. So, Chris, you were nice enough to, once I offered, let's just talk it out. You said absolutely. So here we are a couple days later. Obviously, as I kind of alluded to, the Tortorella debate, where it stands right now, there's a lot of people on Twitter that are just out on Torts. They have all sorts of words. I don't want to put any words in your mouth for you. So with that, Chris, you seem to be one of those people who are definitely not on the Torts train. Take as much time as you need and just explain to me where you're at with that and why.
Okay. So first, I just think that Torts is the message is not working anymore. The team from this year, from last year, we've seen a lot of regression or stagnation. I would say the only player who's really, in my eyes, has taken a step forward, if you can call it that, is TK, and I think that's more of him just doing the same as he was last year. Tippett does not look as good as he did last year. Foerster doesn't. Brink doesn't. The list goes on and on. I guess my main gripe with Tortorella specifically centers around Matvei Michkov. And to me, he is a player who does not have the athletic gifts to rely on that, right? So the way that he creates offense is by using his brain. And I'll say he has great hand-eye coordination, his mechanical skill, the way he can execute plays in tight areas, the things that he does, like he will think of something and he can execute that instantaneously, which is very, very rare. But he does not have speed or strength or size to carry him. So his offense is created by sort of exploiting the natural flow of hockey, right? Like blowing the zone early, hunting for open space in the offensive zone, trying weird things like Michigan moves and sharp angle shots. So Tortorella benching him for those things is counterproductive. He needs to kind of figure out the limit in the NHL, right? He has to figure out what works and what doesn't work within his skill set. And reducing his ice time is just reducing the opportunity he has to do that. So it's just going to drag that process out. And you saw that, right? I mean, I don't know if you have different thoughts, but to me, the play he's benched for in the Islanders game and the goal he scores against Washington are almost carbon copies. Both times the other team had possession of the puck. Michkov is at center ice. One time the Flyers win the battle and it's a goal. The other time they don't and it's a goal against. And I don't know that benching him did anything there. So I don't know if you want to respond to that.
Well, let's talk about the two goals, because to me, there was at least a difference that I was trying. And again, this is why I hate Twitter. It's how everything's meant to be a mic drop, so it's tough to explain things. So in the Islanders game, it looks like I watched that one on TV. So I could barely even see Michkov during that play. It looks like they take a shot from the point that's blocked by, I want to say, Coots. And it looked like Michkov at that point had just bolted. Like this is an opportunity for a breakaway, home run, pass play, whatever. But when the puck hit off of Coots, it went right back like outward, and the defenseman easily stepped up. And I don't remember if he scored directly, but the play led almost instantly to a goal. He just, at that point, he's abandoning the position of the ice that he's supposed to be patrolling while they're still playing defense, which is definitely something he does. In that scenario, I definitely don't want him doing that. He's got to be a little more sure that they have possession and can't abandon his post like that. Where I'll give you some leeway is in that game where the coach is coming out, because I'm not going to sit here and tell you that Torts is perfect. I'll never say that. But in that game, and you got a coach telling you that they're trying to win, even though we all want to tank, and he gets all pissy about that, and they're trying to win. You can't, and he deserved to get yelled at. The blow up on the bench, I had nothing wrong with. You have two passionate guys, and I love that Michkov is passionate. Let's not forget, Michkov's the guy who had got a bad rap in Russia, which is an unfair bad rap. It just made it sound like he was a bad teammate, mostly from Montreal fans who were just so butthurt by not selecting him. But with the actual reality of it was he wanted his teammates to do things that they just physically couldn't do because his mind worked faster than theirs. And that led to frustration on his part. And he lashed out a little bit. He meets a guy like Torts. The two are just naturally going to have fireworks. I would hope, I can't say for sure, but I would hope that when it's all said and done, everybody just goes back to what they're doing, and it is what it is. So back to the play. So in that scenario, that's a bad move. You're completely leaving your guy and your section of the ice unmanned. Now, if I shoot over to the Washington game, that part of the ice where Michkov would have been patrolling, and he definitely took off early. I won't argue that, but there was nobody there. The defenseman had shaded to the center, if not further, and I don't know if it was the defenseman on his side or the other side that pinched, came in, and they didn't quite have possession yet, but once the play got, what's the word I want to use? The puck was loose, I guess. It was a higher percentage chance, smarter play. There's nobody to patrol. If he takes off and they regain the puck, there's nobody where he would have been anyway. He would have to come back, no doubt. But there was no defenseman at that part of the ice, that part of the top of where the blue line is towards the bench there. So him taking off there, I felt if things go bad, it's not really going to hurt them. And if they go good, he's wide open. He doesn't even have to. You don't even have to make that spectacular of a pass because there's nobody there. So for me, it's not a huge difference because he's still taking off early. But if I don't want this removed from his game completely, I want him to want to do this. I much preferred the Washington goal to the Islanders goal. That for me, if you think you saw something different, by all means. But to me, he was wide open and he had all day. The only thing I'll say is like he was almost at the other team's blue line by the time he got the puck, but he walked in on a breakaway there. But there was nobody he was supposed to, in that scenario, defend based on him patrolling that section of the ice. To me, that was the difference when I was trying to articulate time and place. There's a time and place, and it's there's always going to be shades of gray. Well, I thought that was a good opportunity. No, I thought that sucked. Like I get all that. In those two specific goals, one was a definite no for me, unless you're down 3-0 in the third period or something. And the other one, because it was 0-0, and I understand why you risking it at 0-0. In that specific scenario against Washington, I feel like a lot of players may have jumped, maybe not as much as he did, but they may have been taken up off ice because it was nothing but daylight, and there was nobody back that far for him to defend. That was the only thing I was trying to articulate when it came to those two specific plays. As far as just Torts in general, one other thing you brought up was the stagnation of certain players, and this is where I have to disagree. I'll give you a Tippett. Tippett's going through something right now. We see this when players get paid, though, sometimes. TK is like the one guy. He gets paid, he gets better. Both contracts, he's gotten better. TK's a superstar, so it's not even worth mentioning. But I'll give you Tippett. Tippett's definitely, he has his spurts. He's a goal scorer. I think he's going to be streaky. It is what it is. Now he's hurt. But when I think about you named Foerster and Brink, and both of those guys have been on the best line of this team has had all year. And for me, I'm not going to say, I think I know what Brink is. I don't think he's going to be much more than a third line. Maybe he could jump up to the second line in a pinch style of player. I like the guy. I can definitely live without him. Foerster, I mean, where's he at on the season with his scoring? Because I think he's finished last year with 20 goals exactly. I can't remember how many assists. But again, he's a part of that line. He's also scored in that game as well. That had that team going. And that's their third line and their second power play, technically. So I really can't hold anything against this season, the development of, I know you didn't mention Cates, but he's on that line, Brink, Cates, and Foerster. So I'm going to have to disagree in that regards when it comes to them. As far as forwards go, I'm trying to think of anybody else that I'm just.
Okay, real quick, I just want to so the reason I specifically named those two is I think that, I don't know if you see it differently, but to me, what we're seeing now, and I think you're going to see more changes come. I think personally, I think Tortorella has either been told to tone it back with Michkov, or has been told that this is kind of the end of the road for him, given the nature of his last few press conferences and the reversal of the leash on Michkov, like seemingly overnight out of nowhere. But specifically with Brink and Foerster, right? Currently, Bobby Brink, I just pulled up Hockey Reference here. Last season, 57 games, 11 goals, 12 assists, 23 points. This season, 54 games, 7 goals, 16 assists, 23 points. So basically the exact same player. The difference is he was a +1 last year and a -12 this year, if you put any stock into that stat at all. Foerster, last season, 77 games, 20 goals, 13 assists, 33 points. This season, 56 games, 15 goals, 10 assists, 25 points. I think what I was getting at is not that those two have regressed, but that I think the Flyers, Briere specifically, anticipated if we're almost a playoff team and we swap out what's left of Cam Atkinson for Matvei Michkov, right? And we have Drysdale healthy under Brad Shaw, we're a playoff team, right? We should be a playoff team, or at least at the exact same spot we were last year, where we are in the hunt down to the wire, which they are clearly not right now. So I think the Farabee and Frost trades are signaling that they're acknowledging that plan did not work, because they were betting on these guys to not just be the same as they were last year, but to be markedly better, which I don't think anyone but TK really has been from their last season performance.
Okay, a couple of things to unpack there. Yeah, so as far as points go and progression in general, especially with a guy like Brink, who I don't even think we expected to make the team last year, if his points are on par and they're roughly the same, it is what it is with a guy like that. It's never going to be a straight upward line when it comes to progression. It's going to be peaks and valleys. Ultimately, if anything, I was nervous with Foerster to start the season, because one thing that kept him from not getting benched was his defensive play, which has obviously come around, but it was a little slow to start. With them carrying a load of the team this year, I think it's a stretch to say that. I get what you're saying about the points, but for me, I can't just go by that. I got to go by their overall body of play. I think the team as a whole, as on the season, is worse than last year. And I know you say, well, they lost Atkinson and they brought in Michkov, and Michkov started the season great, but admittedly, the player, the coach, and the GM, he's tired. He's still getting used to this, and you can see it. There are games where he does not have jump. He had jump in Washington, and I didn't say what I said just because he scored. Like, he was buzzing.
Oh yeah, he was dominant that whole game. Yeah,
yeah, and you know, and part of it was just excitement from, you know, I hadn't been in games since like the Lawton 4-goal game, so like that was great. And it was, Washington's great. I thought they were going to get smoked. To be honest with you, I thought it was going to be a real bad game. But if there's any reason why this team, and I think last year threw a lot of people's predictions, I guess, or what they felt of the team off, because they were not really supposed to do that last year. With Torts' first year, they were horrible, dog shit. And then last year was like, holy, they should have made the playoffs. They really did. But one thing they had for the first part of the season was they had Farabee playing well. Coots looked like the old Coots, but mostly they had Carter Hart and they had Urson, and they were both playing well, except for Urson's like first two starts. Once Hart was gone and Coots fell off and Farabee stopped playing, that team unraveled. This year, and some of it is Briere's fault, because the Kolosov thing is a whole nother situation, conversation. But the goaltending, that has been the number one reason why this team isn't anywhere near the playoffs. I mean, and they're getting better. Like when Erisson's not, when he's playing and he's not hurt or worried about getting hurt, because that was the thing, they're in a much better position. Fedotov, he does a solid job, at least now, but he always seems to give up 3 or 4 goals. Like it just seems to be what it is. And there's always a softie in there. Goaltending drags this team down. Goaltending demoralizes the rest of the team when they give up softies early. And they've been getting better with that, but I never felt that this team thought that they were going to push for the playoffs. I think they could have been in second place in the Metro and still traded players at the deadline. Maybe not a Farabee Frost trade, because if they're that good, that means that those guys are probably playing better. But I think Farabee has, and ever since like the surgery, really, ultimately as a whole, I think every year he's trending downwards, and he's making $5 million for 3 years. I think the Flyers want cap flexibility. That's why that trade made sense to me. And Frost is a guy, I think the only person who really liked him was Danny Briere. I really feel that he was the
and
only
Bill
guy.
Meltzer.
Yeah, of course. How could I forget? Yeah, I think he's covering Calgary games now.
Yeah.
I'm seeing a lot of highlights. It sucks. I like both players, especially Farabee. And on the one Farabee goal he put up, I'm sorry, the one Frost goal he put up, Farabee was the other player on the ice on the 2-on-1, I think. But yeah, so I just feel like, what we're all, give a little leeway here. Was Torts hard on Frost? Oh God, yes. Like, I'm an old school guy in the sense that I feel like Frost should have burst into Torts' office and laid it down. Like, why aren't you playing me? This is BS. Like, way earlier than he did. But every guy's different. I get it. But I never felt this team, and look, the players aren't going to tank. They were drilling that into our heads. We know that, but they still feel the need to always tell us. They were always going to trade at the deadline or before. It was either going to be Lawton Risto or whoever they did end up trading or something. I really didn't think they were going to go for it, even not do it. Like, they were never going to add, but even not do anything at all, just kind of try to make the playoffs. You'd really have to sell me on that one. And especially with the way the goaltending started this year and that whole 3-headed goalie fiasco because of Kolosov and all that. So that right there is a fundamental disagreement. And I don't think you're alone. I think a lot of people think that way. I think last season messed with a lot of fans' heads where this team is at, because I think the management came out from the get-go and said, this is going to be a long rebuild. We're going to do this right. And because they didn't trade everybody immediately, I think people thought, well, maybe long to them is a couple of years, or they saw something they liked last year, so they're going to go for it. I don't think the plan has changed. I mean, to trade, I can't say the trade flat out proves it, even though in a sense it does. But I think those players, unfortunately, they identified them as not being a part of what they are going to envision this team when they do make the playoffs. And they wanted that cap flexibility. I mean, they've traded a friggin' center, their most talented offensive center, skill-wise, and they got nothing back. Like, that tells you where their mind's at as a franchise, what they're building towards. And when it comes to Torts, and I know he's rough, and I personally, I like that. I do, because we had limp noodles behind the bench like Dave Haxtell, who was supposed to be good with the young kids, and that was a fiasco beyond fiascos. On top of that, we've been blaming the coach since Laviolette was let go 3 games into the season. And a lot of it's like, it's got to be on the players. Like, I know he's tough and he's not perfect. He benches Michkov too much. He definitely sits him out too much. I don't think I finished my point from the Islander game. They're trying to win. You have a 4-on-4 late in the third, and he's not out there. You have a power play late in the third. He needed to get back out there,
He did it with TK earlier in the year. He didn't play him in overtime after the one penalty or something. I forget what game it was, but they lost in overtime because he refused to play TK for the last few minutes of the third and in overtime. So
yeah, and that's Torts being Torts. And it's one of those things. If you want this team to win and think that they're going to try to make the playoffs, like, if this was our guy and we were trying to win, I would hate Torts too. I really would. I would have every issue under the sun. I'd be like, I don't think he's ruining anybody, especially Michkov. But if you're trying to win, there's things you are doing that are actively not trying to win. So I'm like, are you telling us the truth, or what's it about? However, from my understanding where the team is at and how they're building, if they're going to try to not do it this year, and Torts is flat out a teacher at this point, and maybe he's a dick, I get it, but I don't think he's a dick just for the sake of being a dick. And part of what he's doing now that he never did in his youth, he's honestly apologizing. Excuse me. He had, I believe, I see if I still have the quote. I think it was about the blow up with Michkov. It was either that or
Yeah, you're talking about where he said emotion's a double-edged sword, and I probably should have played him in the third.
I believe that's it. Yeah. Somebody asked him a question about, he said he snapped back at you. You appreciate that? He goes, I do. I like that. That's overlooked. I like that. I like that he likes that players go back at him, because I think Cutter Gauthier did a number on this city, the fans wise, like every prospect now. And Michkov's you can't, if you screwed up with Michkov, it's over. So I get that. But because Gauthier is such a bitch, I really believe that a lot of people now when it comes to prospects, you got to put on the gloves, the white, and you got to handle them softly and gently and give them whatever the hell they want. And Kolosov comes to mind. That man should not be in the NHL. That is absolutely ridiculous. Now, you want to call me crazy? I'm the kind of guy who's like, if he doesn't want to go to the AHL, then let his ass go back to Russia. This is bullshit. Like, the inmates don't run the asylum. Briere does. This is bullshit. So, and unless he was some kind of generational prospect, but then he would probably be good enough to play in the NHL. So that's already where my mindset's at. So, and to continue the quote, he says, and then it's done with. I like that as well. 10 minutes after that happened, I was done with it. I still think I need to go through the process. Quite honest, if I do it again, I probably should have played him in the third. I mean, at least he's honest. If I did, but coulda, shoulda, would have. I learned to. Emotion is double-edged sword. Yeah, you're right. That's what he said. And it's a really good thing, but you make mistakes too. We can both live in that world. Does it absolve him of everything? No, of course not. But I am glad that he at least acknowledged it. And maybe going forward, that won't happen as much. I do think if he's trying to break Michkov, and everybody for that matter, but Michkov's the important one, and I think he's harder on him for a reason, of bad habits. What he did in the Islanders game, that was a bad habit. It's a habit, but that's bad. And what he did in the Washington game, I think that's the time to do it. So from what I see whenever it looks bad and a team loses, everybody freaks out. So I feel like that has a lot to do with it. Where they're at in the standings has a lot to do with it. But I don't think they were ever really going for it. So Michkov shouldn't even be here. He came over 2 years early. He was 19 for where we're at now. Majority of the season.
Let me just unveil my conspiracy theory here on that. There is no shot, 0% chance the Flyers did not know before they even selected Matvei Michkov that he was not coming over. Like they knew he was going to be here this year when they met with him in Voorhees before the draft. Okay, just follow me for a second. We know, going back in time, that the Flyers knew at that point in time when Briere took over, Gauthier was asking out. They tried to trade him to Montreal for the 5th overall pick, right? So they knew he was out. You're in a rebuild. You just brought this new management team in, okay? Your whole new era of orange, blah, blah, blah. Is there any shot you sign off on drafting Michkov, who was the one talented prospect in that draft with the most character question marks, and will he come over and the contract? There's no way they do that if they don't know, or at least have a good inkling. So I think there were conversations that were had. So this whole 2 years early thing, I don't necessarily buy that, because I don't think they make that pick if he's the dark horse, or the whatever you want to call it, the question mark that he was billed before the draft, with knowing what they knew about Gauthier. Like that, because if you pick Michkov, right, and he doesn't come over, or he stays in the KHL, or he's there for 3 years, or all the stuff that was circulating about him happens, you're dead in the water. I mean, you're done. You saw what happened when the Patrick pick blew up, right? And that was we weren't even supposed to have that high of a pick. You screw up 2 firsts in a row like that, you're done. You're dead for a decade.
Okay, so if it were 100% Michkov's choice, I could definitely get on board with that. But it was the geopolitical where the world was. That was the overall issue, with Russia being banned from the IHHF or IIF, whatever it is. All the sanctions that Russian hockey's getting, they're still not in the 4 nations. I think that was the main concern. Michkov, yeah, we heard the character concerns, and he definitely picked where he wanted to play. So there is something to what you're saying. And yeah, I mean, if you screw up your top draft picks in a rebuild, that's going to bite you pretty hard. I get that. And there is something to it in the sense that we know that Fedotov's agent is Michkov's agent, at least in Russia. And we know why Fedotov got the money he did, because the agent gets a portion of it. This is probably the worst kept secret. And they overpaid Fedotov to overpay the agent to allow Michkov, part of the deal is to get Michkov over early. So they definitely finagled things, and I'm sure they had these conversations, and I'm sure that they put these plans in motions, but I do think there was still risk involved just with the,
oh yeah,
but I'm
big
saying, brother of Russia.
There's like the narrative that Briere tells out in the wild, where 2 weeks before Michkov was released, we haven't talked to him. As far as we know, there's 3 years left on the deal, even though he'd already played a year, by the way. You're just saying the company line. Like that's all bullshit. Like that didn't happen.
Yeah, I think when it got closer to this season, they had a better understanding. Really made Montreal look stupid, which was great. The fans, anyway. So I think there was more to it than that. But ultimately, I don't think they're taking a shot in the dark at 7 when that's probably going to be their highest pick for a bit. Well, I mean, we'll see what happens this year. But that and him falling there, too. I mean, part of me is like, do you just take that risk because this guy he should have went 2 overall? Like, unless you think Fantilli's better. I personally,
I think he should have went 1, but that's
okay. Hey, I'm all for that too. I would be great. We would look like geniuses. So I think part of that was like, look, if I can get I'm going to lose this guy. If I can get this guy at 7, I'll take the risk, because what's the alternative? Ryan Leonard looks like a hell of a player, but like, he's no Matvei Michkov. So I don't know if it's perfectly like that. We'll still consider it as a conspiracy theory. As a guy who likes conspiracy theories, you're at my own heart with that one, so I'll give you that. But I do think ultimately the only point I was trying to make is he's super young. He was a teenager for most of the year so far. He's gonna make mistakes. He barely speaks the language. I don't even know when they're talking to each other on the bench, outside of I'm angry, you're angry, if they're even understanding each other. And it's a culture shock. Like, I think a lot of this season is getting him to play an NHL structured game, but get used to the workload, which is definitely an issue. So when I look at if he ruining his game or anything like that, outside of making it not fun for the fans in the moment, I don't think so. Like, I think Michkov's still going to do what he wants. He still tries the Michigan. He's practicing it in practice right in front of Torts. I think that there are times he's going to let him do his thing. And there's times where you're going to be like, you can't do that there. Except for he's much more of a dick about it. And I think, when you look, if you think this team should be making the playoffs and that's their timeline to make the playoffs and still kind of rebuild and, get the playoff experience, which I know is important. I could see you being upset with Torts, but I personally don't. It's just like a Twitter thing. Like, we have a lot of writers on and other podcast guys. So I don't get that sentiment with Torts. Some of them don't want him to be a lame duck coach and they'd rather just move on after this year. Look, Mike Sullivan becomes available. See ya, Torts. I could give a shit. Like that's it. The X's and O guy is going to come in and he's going to be the one to really get this thing going, go to the playoffs, hopefully a cup. Torts is just teaching. This is just learning and teaching, and it's not going to be pretty because they're not a good team. They are not a good team, and they have good pieces. And what they've done, what Brad Shaw has done with the defense has been fantastic. But ultimately, the goaltending, which has been a little bit better, has really steamrolled this team early. And I think a lot of it's like a trickle effect where we're at as fans, what we're seeing on the ice, what we think we're perceiving. At the end of the day, I wanted a hard-nosed coach in here. I think it was way too soft for the last since 2011, something like. How far back do you go? Like, so I did want a coach like that to create a culture. And what Jimmy brought this up as well, my co-host. You mentioned earlier the message, and there's something to that. Like, is enough of the culture, the message, is that here now, or we can move on from Torts? And I feel like if they had a new coach next year, yeah, I'd be fine with that. I would. I do think he's done enough. Now, if they kept him, would I be grabbing my pitchfork? No, I'm not there. I'm not there. No, not yet. And I really don't think it'll get to that point. I think we'll just be tired of Torts and ready to see. It's been a long time of losing. It has. I get it. And then people get impatient. They see the slightest bit of success and they want more of that. I get it. But as far as, do I think that like his coaching style and what he's doing has the team regressing and all that stuff? I just think it's part of the growing pains. I think they're all young players. It's all growing pains. And we're going to see more of it. I think if a new guy came in here, we're still going to see it. Maybe he just doesn't bench him, I just think to
to go on towards a few more things about him. The biggest feature, I guess, of his coaching style is I will say that I don't have a problem with hard asses in coaching. I actually think that is a very good demeanor, right? The problem I have is Torts proclaims himself to be someone who fairly applies that standard when he doesn't. For example, um, the Michkov plays where he cheats or whatever, and Torts blows up at him. We never see Owen Tippett get benched for taking a 0.5% shot from the outside, ringing it off the glass, and creating a turnover, which he does like 8 times a game, right? But you'll have, I know this isn't the same person, but the same sort of idea. You have Scott Hartnell on TV talking about, oh, Matvei failed to Michigan. It's just a turnover. So's a missed shot, buddy. Like, you know what I mean? So I don't think that the standard that Torts has, he applies fairly. Like, and I kind of agree with Frost. Like, I never really liked him. He wasn't skilled enough to play as on the perimeter as he liked to, and he never went to the hard areas. And I understand a coach being like, he kind of did that with Tippett. I mean, early on, I remember the quotes with Tippett. He's like, you got to tell me who you are. Like, pick a direction, right? Like, either you're going to be a guy who goes to the net, because Frost, when he does that, he scores nice goals in tight. I mean, there was a couple of those like sharp angle roof shots where he's like coming around from behind the net that he scored this season. I think he had one of those in Calgary already. But he never committed to a style. He was just kind of like, I don't know. He just struck me as someone who didn't really give a shit. So I'll give Torts credit there. Like, I don't have a problem with him being hard on a guy like that. Michkov is not that. He goes to the hard areas, and he's been like, I always hear this mantra brought out that he needs to learn to be a pro. Matvei Michkov has been a professional hockey player since he was barely 15 years old. Yeah, he's only 20, but he's been playing pro hockey for 5 years. Okay. He understands that when he cheats and the other team scores a goal, that was bad. You don't need to bench him to teach him that lesson, right? Like, he understands that did not work, and he's going to try to adjust it. So my point is that the things that Michkov is going to learn are from him trying his crazy things and them working or not working. And I would rather him, if he's tired, which whatever, maybe he is, maybe he isn't. If he's that tired, play him every other game. Don't play him back-to-backs, whatever. Give him the NBA star treatment. And the games he does play him the way that you should play a player of his caliber. Because when you're playing him with, I know the team is just not in a great spot, but when you're playing him with subprime line mates and you're giving him, 7, 8, 9 minutes a night, you're not doing him any favors, right? And the only thing you could say there is, well, maybe they're going to use him as like a power play weapon or like a late, down a goal, pull the goalie extra attacker weapon. There's been multiple times that he's not the 6th man out. They don't play him power play 1 consistently. Like, it just, like, if he's tired and the only thing he is good at an NHL level is creating offense, the very least you have to play him in those situations. Agree? Like,
well, that goes back to the benching in the Islanders game. It's like, look, he made your point, like, which I do think the point does need to be made. I understand what you're saying about him being a pro and all that, but a lot of these guys, I know they didn't play in pro leagues, but the KHL is vastly different in the sense that I remember hearing a quote from a player when he first came to the NHL from Russia, and he got benched for not dumping the puck in. This is years ago. And he goes, dump the puck in. Like, we used to get benched in Russia for dumping the puck in. Like, don't give up possession. So there is a culture change in the way the game is played. It's more likely you're going to take those chances and play that style of play because the whole team's playing that style in the NHL, particularly in Torts' current system. And when it's a new guy, hopefully they change things. I think you're going to have to play within the system and not go off on your own. And that's a lot of what it has to do. And if you do go off on your own, there is an aspect to this. Like, if you do it, You better be right. I think Mike Richards said one of his coaches told him that. Like, if you do it, you better have a good result or it better not burn us. So there's that's always going to be there. But like what you mentioned with Tippett, like it's high percentage versus low percentage. Islander game, that was a low percentage chance that puck was even going to get to you. The Washington game, it was daylight. It was a high percentage chance something positive was going to happen and a low percentage chance something negative was going to happen. So I think it's a lot of that, finessing, keeping his game, what made him successful in the KHL, and fitting it into an NHL style of game that this team is going to build ultimately. And I think it's a little bit of that. Does he kind of muffle his offense when he shouldn't? Yeah, I won't argue that. I do think he benches him too much. I think he benches him for too long. Like the rest of the game, like that's absurd. Like that's, you're going to kill your other guys too while you're at it, which Torts is known to do. That to me, that's something more that I scratch my head at Torts. I'm like, dude, what about the rest of the team? They all still got to play a full season here.
And that was the night you traded Frost and Farabee, and one or both of them were pulled for parts of that game for that or injuries, and it's like, so now you're just down 2-3 players. Like
Frost didn't feel good. Yeah, that's what happened. Yeah, so that's where we'll find common ground. That I'm kind of like, dude, now you have more reason to put him back in. But
well, the thing that I was trying to articulate in the argument we had was that, so if you go back and rewatch both goals, the two plays in question here, the Islanders goal and the Michkov goal against Washington, I will grant you that in the Islanders play, Michkov's responsibility is, from his perspective, the right point, right? That defenseman is his defensive responsibility, sort of the top of the circle there, on the right side. And that guy was still there. The Islanders had the puck on the left point from the Flyers' goal perspective, and there was a block shot by Coots, and the puck ended up going to the other defenseman that Michkov was supposed to cover. In the Washington game, when he left the zone, the defenseman that he was covering had the puck and floated into the zone low, and he blew the zone. Now the Flyers created the turnover, but Michkov's guy had the puck when he left the zone. Like, the Capitals had possession, his man had possession, and he was gone. So maybe there's like if they're playing a zone system and he, his zone was freer in that, whatever. But to me, I don't see there being a stark enough difference between those two plays. Not to beat the dead horse. I just wanted to kind of explain. And the other part I was getting at was, if you're talking about we're trying to win games, both plays happen, I believe, in a 0-0 game, right?
Yes.
And the point I was trying to make is, if you're going to take that home run shot, and I get what you're saying, like if you want any chance at beating the Capitals, who are leading the President's Trophy race at the time, you have to take risky plays, right? You got to blow the zone, your D have to pinch. But my counterpoint was, who is more likely to punish you if you make the wrong bet? The best team in the NHL or the Islanders, who are essentially your peer, right? Like, the Islanders have less skill to punish that mistake, so you would think there would be a longer leash. And if it's just results based, well, no shit, it didn't work. Like, everybody knows that, including Michkov. Benching him for the game doesn't teach anything to anyone other than that Torts has pride.
So I get what you're saying. For me, ultimately, it just came down to, like, you don't want to remove that from Michkov's game. If you're going to do it, look at the two goals. Which one are you more likely? And they do play a zone on defense like that. There was nobody in his zone. Did he leave early? I concede. He definitely left early. And like, to say, like, who's to say something goes wrong in that play and somehow it does wind up being a big deal that Torts doesn't yell at him for that? That, and I would have probably been like, dude, what are you doing? When is he going to do it then? Like, at that point, then you are starting to take that out of his game. So, I guess on any play, something negative could happen because the puck could bounce funny off the boards or something. But, like, if he's going to do it, I try to think of scenarios. To me, that's a scenario you got to try for it. It's like, look, if we just sit back with this lineup and this backup goalie and let this team just shoot on us, you might as well not even show up, because they just didn't have the squad. They were missing so many players. They traded to Risto's hurt. Urson's not in. I think somebody else is out as well. And you saw the goals they did score were impressive. Like, they were picking corners in that game. And, obviously they still lost. But if they'd have just sat back and tried to block shots, they'd have probably lost that game 5-0. Like, it would have maybe 3-0. They would have had no offense. So if I'm going to look at myself, look at the game and Michkov, and when is he going to do that? I can't find too many other examples outside of it being like a broken play when he should at least attempt that. He just goes a little early. I do think he left early. If the other guy saws the puck, he's not supposed to chase him. He's supposed to stay where he's at. But kind of hoping for the home run pass like that, it's risky, which if it doesn't work, you're in trouble, kind of comes in. I just can't see if that player, if they kept possession after that. I'm trying to see if obviously Michkov would have to come back to the zone, but I can't see how that burns them unless that defenseman floats back to the blue line before Michkov can meet him and he's able to rip a shot or come back in again or something. There's a lot of what ifs. So comparatively, that team was cycling. The Islanders were cycling the puck. They were all where they're supposed to be. So when the loose play happened, everybody was where they needed to be to regain the puck. That was a bad play on Michkov. There was a wrong time to do that, especially nothing. Washington, I get what you're saying, but like for me, I don't know when else he does it. Unless there's a broken play, somebody falls or stick is broken or something like that. To me, that's the time to do it. And is it a perfect example? Probably not. But again,
no, I mean, the threat of Michkov, I think his biggest advantage, what is going to be his biggest advantage as he grows into the player he's ultimately going to become, is he's going to, I mean, this might be hyperbolic, but I think he's going to be like a psychological weapon. Like, I remember back, for reference, I'm freshly turned 33, so that gives you kind of like a time frame of my Flyers fandom. I remember being in high school and early college and watching Crosby, and every single game he scores against us, and every single game I'm screaming at my TV, how is he this wide open? How do you lose him, right? That's kind of what I see in Michkov. Like, that's the way he plays in the offensive zone. And I know Crosby's a center, and he wasn't early on. Early on, he was a cherry picker too. Like, let's not get it twisted. He was not some Selke candidate in his early years, but those players, right, that can exploit the structure of hockey, and like Michkov blowing the zone, Michkov trying the Michigans, what that does is it causes chaos. It keeps the other team guessing. Like, those defensemen don't feel the safety to pinch if they know they have this home run threat behind them. It's kind of like the deep threat in football, right? You have to have both aspects of your attack. You have the run game and the pass game, so they can't sell out for either one, right? Like, that's what I see as Michkov's biggest strength, is his ability to kind of like prevent teams from doing crazy stuff, because he'll torch them if they do, right? Like, he'll burn you if you just ignore him. Like, I don't know if I explain that well or not, but that's kind of what I see. So, like, to me, he has to figure that out. And I don't know that playing him in these limited minutes is helping him do that faster. I agree with you. I have no doubts that Michkov is like going to go back to Russia and he does crazy shit. Like, I'm not one of those people. Like, he's a Kobe Bryant level sports psychopath who wants to be the best ever. Like, he's going to do that no matter what. He doesn't care what obstacles he has to go through. I just think that the way Torts is handling him is dragging that runway out longer. That's my biggest complaint.
So I think I got to the fundamental issue where you and I are with Torts. So I agree with essentially everything you said. I love the threat. It's like Ovi on the power play. Like, he just stands there, but he still scores all these goals. Like, it's just makes it special players do stuff like that. Where I'm at is I think that Michkov will develop that part of his game. At least we hope he will. but not yet. Like not his first year in the league. I think that will come as time goes on. Much like we know how Crosby when he first came into this league, how he played, and how much different he is a player now. It's like night and day. And I think Michkov, he's going to get there. He's going to be that guy eventually. And all Torts is doing, and if Torts was going to be with him his whole career, this would be horrible because it would be too much. It would be beating. It would just he would be a defensive right wing, and that's it. If Torts stuck with him his whole career, and that I like him now when he's young and he's raw. You can structure his game, and that other stuff you're talking about because he's so naturally skilled. I think that's naturally just going to come later. And he's going to be that guy. And I think we'll look back on these years, and he may not be like, hey, I didn't enjoy myself too much, but I appreciated it because I've seen what Torts in the past has done with defense, with TK. Like, I mean, the right players react to Torts. When players talk negatively about Torts, think about the players that's saying that. They're not – it's like Matthew Barnaby or some goof guys that should have been better that one's slipping my mind right now. It's killing me. But the guys who – respect Torts, like Rowinski has come out and said nothing but positive things about Torts. I think a lot of good players who do respond to this kind of coaching are killers, like Michkov, and they look back on their time with Tortorella and they're thankful. Now, ultimately, time will tell, and maybe that's too much. A lot of people don't like him, and I think it's okay to be saying he's going to come out and thank him is a big stretch. But I do think that everything you said. It could still come to be. It's his rookie year. It's his first year in the league. And there's so many factors, culture shock, barely understanding things. It's like, look, if there's one thing you understand, it's hockey. Let's play a NHL-style structured game. I want to keep you, but I want to keep you also as the team, part of the team and structured. And I think over time, next year, a couple of years from now, he'll be defensively responsible, at least enough, but he'll still have that skill, and he'll know when to take those chances, and he'll take them in the right moments and whatnot, and ultimately be a better player is what I'm getting at. And these are just teaching years. I don't care. The good news is the team isn't playing a division rival and getting blown out 9-1 or 8-3. These guys are fighting for each other. These guys are every game, even their losses are hard fought losses. Like that's all we wanted was the effort, competitive, and sink in the standings for a good pick because we still need a center. So like that's all I see when I see this season. And does Torts deserve some hate? Of course, what coach wouldn't? And maybe he deserves a little bit more than your average coach because he's too rough or mishandled some players, I guess.
Well, I just want to jump in here. I think that there are two John Tortorellas, okay? And we're not arguing about the same John Tortorella. I think John Tortorella, as a motivator of human beings, as a person who teaches people to, be accountable to their teammates and to, put the needs of the team above themselves. That person, I'm in 100% agreement with. Okay. John Tortorella, the hockey mind, I think is a babbling idiot stuck in the year 2000. Okay. So you said earlier, the thing that sunk the Flyers most this year was their goaltending. Okay. What has John Tortorella had at every other team he has coached that he does not have now?
He's had goaltending.
Elite goaltending. I mean, his worst goalie was Nikolai Habibulin, who's a 4-time All-Star Stanley Cup champion. That's his worst goalie, okay? Luongo, Lundqvist, Bobrovsky. So his system, right, I think is sort of it's not exactly the same system, but it's got a lot of similarities to sort of like what the Devils played when they had Brodeur, where you're gonna nothing cheap, everything from the outside, no easy shots, no middle of the ice, block shots, clog lanes, keep everything outside, and then hit him in a counterattack, hit him on the power play. Well, the Flyers power play is trash. That's not his fault. I mean, I guess it kind of is because he won't fire Rocky or whatever, but I'm not going to blame him for the power play. But the bread and butter of John Tortorella teams is limiting quality shots and relying on star goaltending to sort of wear the other team down, that you can create these odd man rushes and score on counterattacks. They did that when they upset Tampa Bay. All of his teams have had that sort of hallmark. Even the ones that were good, like the Rangers and the Canucks that were deep teams, right? they were still impossible to score against. So if you have bad goaltending, his system is just you just get pinned, right? And there's no light at the end of the tunnel, right? The goalies don't have the rebound control, the puck skills. They can't make the easy saves as we've seen, like you said, Fedota. I think Urson's struggled with this for a lot of his time too, letting in soft goals. Like that just didn't happen in his other team. So I just think that his system with the current Flyers roster does not work. And so if it does not work that way, I would like to see him at least let the players sort of express their individual skill. You know what I mean? Like, I guess the difference, and I kind of see where people get this. Like, when the Flyers got Cam Atkinson, I wanted Travis Konechny to look at what Cam Atkinson was at that point in time and what he was in Columbus and become a copy of him, right? Like that guy who like is a penalty killer and picks off the cross ice pass at the blue line and scores on breakaways. Like, yeah, that TK is like tailor made for that. That's not Michkov. He doesn't have the speed. So like, and maybe he gets that eventually, but he doesn't have it right now. So I don't know. I just think that like his system is not really doing a lot of favors to the players he's supposed to be developing from a hockey perspective. Now, the off ice stuff, the culture, the room, the way you act, all that stuff, the way you stay in shape and work out and conditioning, no problems. I just think the hockey part of it is just I don't see a lot of juice left in that.
Well, I actually agree with you, which is why I think he was hired for the Flyers, because when they were a dumpster fire when he was brought in here. And I don't think, I mean, they did have Hart at the time, so he probably thought he can rely on his goaltending a little bit. But I ultimately think if this team was truly trying to, like, our goal is to make the playoffs and, make some noise, that would be a massive problem because, yeah, you're right. I see that. He's relying on his goalies. He's always had stud goalies, but we're just, all those other teams were all teams that hired John Tortorella to make the playoffs, to do something. And that's not this situation here. And it comes back to a lot of fans think that this team should be pushing for a playoff spot, and we regressed as a team. Where I'm more in line to say that last year was more of an anomaly. Not just with the Flyers, the league. Like, what the hell happened to the Devils last year? Well, injuries is really the answer. They needed goaltending, and now look at them. So I think it's a combination of things. And I don't think you're wrong. I just think that the Flyers front office, they don't view it. John's not here for his X's and O's. He's here for teaching and those things. And I understand there's going to be lumps, and people have a real issue with that. And I get it a little bit. When he overdoes it, I get it. But it is like, for instance, I'm at the game, I'm having a good time. I make that tweet. You weren't the only one. Like, I get, like, it's like they come out of the woodworks. Like, they're mad at me for, I even suggest it or anything. And like, no, we hate Torts and you're not pushing the other message. And it's a lot of hate, man. It is there. People are mad. Like
I want to get your
But
thoughts on this. So you mentioned the players that didn't like playing for Torts, and obviously I think a lot of this is circulated after that. I think it was The Athletic did that poll of, yeah, I'm sure you've seen it, right?
Yeah.
So I would wager that we'll just do like simple math here, because I'm not a statistician. I don't think you are either. But if 40% of players don't want to play for Torts, okay, we'll just be generous and say 60% do. All right, 60% would love playing for Torts. 40% hate them. We'll assume the best case scenario on the other end, that everyone else outside of that is positive. Who are the players that are probably not going to like Torts? Because in my mind, you've got guys who I think like playing for Torts are your Nick Sealers, your Garnet Hathaways, Noah Cates, Ryan Paling, and then you have your odd star players, TK, Werenski, the guys who, like, for whatever reason, they're just on his frequency, right? But I think a lot of star players, like Kuzmenko, is not going to like Torts. I mean, everybody has said that, right? Like, just the way he plays, and like they're not gonna be a fit. So the question is, I guess, if that caliber of player, the skilled player, are the players who, and maybe you have a different perspective that you don't think it's that kind of player, but if the star players are the ones who are saying, I don't want to play for Torts, to me, that's the biggest concern going into this offseason and keeping him, because I think this is the offseason. I'm not saying it has to be the end of it, but this is the offseason where you need to start making moves in the other direction. Like, I'm not saying we don't need to get rid of anybody else, but there has to be some acquisitions. Like, you're not going to go up to the stage in June and make 7 picks in the first 2 rounds. Just, you can't have that many guys at the same age, even if they all hit. Like, you got to start bringing in talent. And if that's the kind of player that doesn't want to play for Torts, that kind of hamstrings Danny, right?
Absolutely. So let me take the first part of the question. I had Charlie O'Connor actually answer this for me because it was a good question. It's like, well, it's a lot of people. Like, say what you will, we know people don't like the guy, but he was like, above Babcock, which is ridiculous.
Right?
But,
like, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, but it is what it is. So basically, I don't want to put words in his mouth. The way he described it, which kind of, because I really didn't have an answer to that question, it was kind of head scratching to me. It's like, I get it, but I don't get it. I didn't think it'd be that bad. A lot of it is, it's not that they hate him, but a lot of players where they're at in their career, they're like, why would I want to go play for Torts? Like, why at this stage of my career and his career would I want to go play for Torts? I'm 30 years old. Like, what am I going to learn? Like, I understand, like, we're a majority of the league, are thinking, like, it's like, there's no reason for me to want to go play for that guy at this point of his career and my career. I'm not going to learn anything else. He might get a little more out of me, but is it really worth all the bullshit? Getting used to him, and then like, I really don't want to deal with that. And then I think some of the younger players, it's all it's like the myth of John Tortorella, like everything they've been told. So those are essentially what Charlie had said. It's a combination of those things, and it does make sense. But what you did say the second about stars coming in here and whatnot, if he was staying long term, I do think that could be an issue. I think the NHL player today is vastly different than it was when I was growing up. So you're 33, I'm 37. So I had a little more of a 90s. Legion of Doom was like when I was 5, 6 years old. So like those guys don't really exist anymore. Like like Mike Keenan. Like,
yeah, every coach was like that. Hitchcock, every coach was that guy. Yeah.
And if Torts is Torts today, Mike Keenan was the Torts then, and that's among a bunch of Tortses. That's how bad he was. And I think players would retire on the spot if they had to deal with a guy like that. My point is, I'm saying the guys are, unfortunately, they're a little bit softer than they used to be. It's nobody's fault. It just is what it is. So to your point that, I do think that could be an issue. Again, though, like, that's a future thing. That's not, and you're right about the draft picks. I bring that up on my show every time. We got a lot of Jim. We got a lot of draft picks. I think if we're going to do anything, it'd be this year, right? Because when else are you going to have all this ammunition? So ultimately, I think teams, if they were to re-sign Tortorella, that would be a problem.
That's kind of the crux of this, right? Like,
and they're not going to do that. I have full faith that he might not even make it past this year if the right guy becomes available.
Right, because I feel like I don't think there's anybody who's like, let him coach out the contract. You cannot let John Tortorella be John Tortorella on an expiring deal. People are going to tune him the fuck out and not listen. Pardon my language. I feel like I say it, but you're not going to get anything if he's a lame duck coach. People are just going to tune him out. Whatever's left of his message and his standard and culture and all that, I don't think you can have that in a lame duck year. So your options are replace him this offseason or extend him. And extending him, and you can always fire the guy, but I'm just saying, like, if you're looking at Elias Pettersson, who's my, golden goose for the offseason, right? If that's the guy you're coveting and he has regressed under Rick Tocchet and he's had issues with JT Miller and all this stuff, is that somebody who's going to be wanting to come here? I don't know if there's trade protection in his contract or not, but a lot of the kinds of guys you're going to have to get are either going to have some sort of trade protection in their contract or they're going to be free agents. I'm not saying we're going to sign like Rantanen or somebody this offseason, but like, you have to convince players to come here. to make this work.
Yeah, and I'll agree on that. Like, I don't think it's the end of the world. I do think if I'm Briere and I'm talking to somebody, the player, if they're really interested in coming to my team, I would have an understanding. Like, look, Torts isn't going to be here. Like, and I agree with the lame duck coach year. Like, they can tune him out. The only thing I'll say to that is if he does go into management, that might be a reason not to be a complete yeah. Oh man, I almost got myself fired. Oh my
a reject. Rejects.
I would have said this is why we're not live. Wow, that would have been bad. Complete idiot. But even then, that's not really a strong point. So ultimately, I do think we're in agreement on the shelf life of Torts. It is at absolute best, 4 years, and it's only because the right guy. I don't think you should fire him and bring in just anybody. Like, I think you need to get the right person here, or at least who you think is the right person. I don't want them to, bring in a retread of somebody who's been pretty bad. But I'm all for moving on. And, I could get behind, like, look, they fix the locker room. We have a good message here. We have a good squad. We have a good culture. Let's move on. I'm totally fine with that. But I don't think the rest of this year or the previous two that he did like any damage or anything like that. So, Chris, we've gone an hour. I was worried we would only go 20 minutes. We've gone an hour. This is a full feature show at this point. So I think we should cut it there. Probably just keep going in circles. But would you agree we at least found some common ground and, talked our issues out?
Yeah, I would just, to wrap it up, I would just say that my main gripe with them keeping John Tortorella right now, just to sort of summarize, is I don't think what he does, which I like, we agreed. I like the hard ass, be a man, be a pro, learn how to be a responsible person. I think he does a good job of that. I don't know how much of that he has left to give. And the X's and O's do not work. So what is the point in keeping him any longer? That's my thing. I don't think he's like actively doing damage, other than he's just dragging out the development of some guys, in my opinion. But I just don't see what the positive of keeping him around any longer is. That's my biggest. It's sort of like the whole issue with the team in general. With they signed TK and Tippett, and now they're trading. Like, just pick a direction. I don't care if you want to do a Florida style, Vegas style, trade all the picks in the world and go for it. If you want to do a Colorado Tampa style tank, I don't give a shit. Just pick a direction, please. And to me, keeping Torts around is another half measure.
Okay, so half measure is definitely the perfect word to use there. So I'll give you that one. I do think there's definitely, there's more teaching to be had. There's more things here and there. But ultimately, do I think that Michkov's going to like fully learn the language and Torts would still be around? Not really. So I'll be a generous host. I'll let you leave on that like last say. We'll end there. But I do think that for the most part, I think we're in the same realm. I think we have different expectations of this season, of this season, where the team is this season, what direction they were going and whatnot. So, Chris, I appreciate you taking the opportunity to come on and not tell me to F off and actually talking it out. So that's great. I would tell you to plug anything you had going, but if you don't have anything, then we'll just cut it there.
Yeah, that's it.
All right. Well, thanks again. I really appreciate it, Chris. I'm going to wrap it up. That's another edition of High and Wide. We didn't have our podcast this week, but Jimmy had 2 different interviews. Please check those out. Check this out. Let us know what you think. Are you team Torts? Are you team fire his ass? Let us know by all means, please. Trade deadline's just around the corner. Let's see what happens. All right. Take it easy, everybody.